feelings of anxiety, inadequacy, and humiliation, and eventually headaches and an upset stomach. As far as his mind and body are concerned, he has failed. And if he worries about it long enough, if he concentrates on failure intensely enough, he will upset himself to the extent that he will fail, and he'll get sick. Now, everything can be used in either of two ways, positively or negatively, constructively or destructively. Worry is the negative use of creative imagination. It's a negative synthetic experience. But most people apparently never realize that positive results, just as real as the negative results of worry, can be achieved through using our imagination constructively. Our minds are complex and marvelous, but like electronic computers, they can only act on the data we feed them. The man who worries about failure is unwittingly defeating himself. He's feeding his mind the wrong data. If he spent the same amount of time visualizing success as he spends thinking about failure, he could reverse the process of synthetic experience. Instead of anxiety, he could develop confidence, self-assurance, poise, and a feeling of well-being would replace apprehension. By concentrating on the success he desires, by synthetically experiencing that success, he can expand his self-image into that of a person for whom success is normal, expected. Why not practice holding the self-image of the person you most want to become? This is the person you can become. If you feel you'd like to enlarge your self-image, then I'd like to invite you to join me in some image building. During the next few weeks, listen to this message at least once a day. This way you'll firmly implant in your mind the concept of the self-image. Use your spare moments to concentrate on your goals and the greater success you seek. Analyze your past successes and formulate ways your success can be increased in the future. While on the way to work, between appointments, while waiting to see a client, these are all excellent times for directing your attention to positive, constructive thoughts. Put more into the positive use of your imagination than you ever put into its negative use, worry. You're merely reversing the same creative process. Now it's working for you instead of against you. Now, since the mind works best when we feed it only one set of instructions, do not worry if you can help it during the course of this exercise. Your creative imagination can enlarge your self-image appreciably in just 3 weeks, and it will if you just let it. Nobody pokes us into glass prisons beyond which we can't grow, but all too often, almost unknowingly, we set unnecessary limits for ourselves by holding a self-image that's restricted, inadequate for the full realization of our potentialities. Each of us is, at this moment, the product of all his thoughts and experiences and environment up to this point. Through thought, we can control to an almost unbelievable degree both our experience and our environment from here on. Whether or not we choose to direct our own course through life is entirely up to us. The important thing is to know that it can be done. This is Earl Nightingale, and thank you.
Maybe you saw the news item sometime back about a Canadian farmer who sold his Stradivarius violin for, I think it was in the neighborhood of $60,000. He sold it to the same New York City dealer he had bought it from many years before. The dealer paid him more for it than he had paid, and that's because, of course, the violin had appreciated in value over the years and because of the shrinking buying power of the dollar. But the farmer sold his precious violin by the world's most famous violin craftsman because, as he put it, I'm getting old and I have no children to leave it to, and by getting it back in the hands of the dealer, he knew that it would wind up with someone who would treasure it as he had. Antonio Stradivari, the Italian violin maker, lived from 1644 to 1737. That's 93 years at a time when the average lifespan was about 30. He worked alone, although later in his life his sons helped him. No committee advised him. No one made decisions for him. His tools were primitive, but that was not important. He put himself into his work. All the world's tools couldn't make up for that. When he was finished with an instrument, when he was sure that his work measured up to his own personal standards, he signed his name to it. And today, more than 200 years later, his name is a household word all over the world. Everybody's heard of Stradivarius, the Latin form of the name that he inscribed on his violins. Throughout history, there have always been men with similar standards of excellence. Authors such as William Shakespeare, artists like Leonardo da Vinci, craftsmen like furniture maker Thomas Chippendale, and silversmith Paul Revere. Everything they did was done well, not because it had to be, but because they wanted it to be. They had only to please themselves, yet the products of their fertile minds and skillful hands are still collected and admired today. What is it that causes one person to take pride in what he does, while others give little or no thought to the quality of their work at all, do you know? Of course, when we talk about Stradivari or Da Vinci, we're talking about great geniuses, towering talents who found their media and became great in them. There have been many other fine violin makers and artists who took just as much pride and care in their work, but lacked the same quality of talent. There are even today many thousands of craftsmen who will not turn out shoddy work and who are proud to sign their names to their creations. They're in the minority, perhaps. They've always been in the minority. But the respect for quality never changes. It still commands the highest price. It's still revered wherever we find it. And the person creating it has gained for himself two precious assets. First, he's built the kind of security that lasts a lifetime. He need never worry about his income. And second, his work is a source of satisfaction and joy to him. He derives deep satisfaction from being an uncommon person. And now a moment for this message. People who set their own high standards to which they make themselves measure up lead enjoyable, exciting lives. Each task they begin is a fascinating contest to achieve their own standards of excellence. Thank you. Hello, I'm Earl Nightingale, and I want to tell you a little story which could make a wonderful difference in your life. Now, if you already know about everything I'm going to say, you're a remarkable person, and according to the latest statistics, you belong to the top 5% of all the working people in the world. You're to be congratulated. If you don't know about the things I'm going to say, well, you've been holding yourself back, not only on the job, but you're also missing a big percentage of the greatest joy in life. I want to talk about your boss and your relationship with him. How you handle this relationship will determine your success or failure. It will determine how much money you make or do not make. And it will determine whether you're a happy person or an unhappy person. So let's talk about you and your boss. Who is your boss? You have only one. And every working person, from the president of the largest corporation to the shoeshine boy, has the same boss. He is simply the customer. There never has been, there is not now, and there never will be any boss but the customer. He's the one boss you must please. Everything you own, he's paid for. He buys your home, your cars, your clothes. He pays for your vacations and puts your kids through school. He pays your doctor bills and writes every paycheck you'll ever receive. He'll give you every promotion you'll ever obtain during your lifetime. And he will discharge you if you displease him. Now, sometimes, particularly in these days of, seemingly complex economics and big business, we lose sight of just what business is. It all started back during the most primitive times. A man, in order to fend for himself and his family, had to provide his own food and his own shelter. He had to do his own fighting and fashion his own rough clothes and crude weapons for hunting and materials for fishing. Later, he had to manufacture his own farming implements. In short, each man had to personally take care of every department of life. Now, naturally, it came about that men and women with certain talents appeared. One was particularly adept at fashioning spears, another at fishing, another at hunting, another at making garments, and so on. And it was only natural that soon these individuals found that they could best spend most of their time in the pursuit of that which they were most talented at and trade their production for the production of others. As a result, the man who made spears found that others would give him a share of their food, clothing, and so on if he'd provide them with spears. Thus, trade and commerce began. Now, it's far more complex today, but still based on the same principle. A person's money is the result of his production, and he trades it for things he needs and wants. And it's here that logical discrimination comes into the picture. Now, since his money is the result of his work, it's left to his discretion where he spends it. And it's here that he assumes the role of boss. He will spend his money only with those whom he feels have earned it. And this is as it should be. You and I are exactly the same way. If someone treats you badly in any way, well, you instinctively feel that he hasn't earned your business, and you will withhold it from him. And our prosperity as individuals hinges directly on our attitude toward what we do for a living. The man who works on an automobile assembly line might not think much about the car at the point of sale, or about the family which will eventually buy and travel in that car. But that family pays his salary, and they will withhold the purchase of the car on which he works if it does not earn their respect and admiration. If you doubt this, even for a moment, think of the cars which once were popular and which can no longer be seen on the road. This applies to all products. Having earned a successful place in the economy should never be confused with keeping it. It must be earned every day, year in, year out. There's not a company that could not go out of business. Everything depends on how the boss is treated, the boss being the customer. And yet the customer is eminently fair, just as you are. He can be won back, and if he's treated with the importance he deserves, he can, in a few years, bring a lot of other people into your place of business. Now, let me tell you something you may not have thought about. If you got in your car and started driving across the country, you'd pass many thousands of businesses, from small restaurants, drugstores, grocery stores, and gas stations to great sprawling corporate complexes covering hundreds of acres and employing thousands of people. By simply looking at each one, you can tell how they're treating the boss. Did you know that your rewards are in exact proportion to your service? Well, that's right. We're paid exactly what we earn, but no more. And you can tell by looking at any business exactly what it has earned by seeing what it has. And it's the same with people. We get back exactly what we earn, but not a penny more. And this, again, is just the way it should be. A person might be underpaid for a while, but the scales of life balance eventually, and he will, in the end, receive just what he's earned. There are, of course, two ways in which we're paid for what we do. One is tangible in the form of money, and the other is intangible, but just as important. To many, it's more important. This latter form of payment comes in the form of inner satisfaction and in the form of joy as a result of accomplishment. It also comes in the form of satisfaction in position, in the standing it gives us. So each of us is paid in these two ways, money and satisfaction. There's a simple way to increase both of these forms of income, money as well as in inner satisfaction, and you'll be able to spend and feel the results. First, I want you to understand completely the great law which lies as the foundation of all life, business and personal. It is that our rewards in life will always be in exact proportion to our service. The more you think about this and observe people in business, the more you'll see the undeniable truth of it. Now try as best you can to estimate the proportion of your total ability you have been giving to your work. I don't think anyone gives 100%. I don't think it's possible to give 100%, day in and day out. I know I don't. But estimate what you consider to be the percentage you have been giving to your work. Would you say it's been 30%, 50%? Anyway, try to decide. Now, since your rewards will be in exact proportion to your service, well, you can increase your income, both financially and from an inner satisfaction standpoint, simply by narrowing the distance between what you have been giving to your work and the 100%, which it may be said you could give under ideal conditions. Now, you don't have to ask for a raise. The income will appear of its own accord and at the right time. You may want to question this, but try to take my word for it. Now, the second point I want to make is this. If you begin to do your work better than you've ever done it before, you will immediately begin to receive incalculably more inner satisfaction. You'll also find what may have been a boring or uninteresting job will take on new meaning and interest. No matter what it is you do during the entire working day, try in every case to do a little more than you have to, more than you're being paid for, because unless you do more than you're being paid for now, you can't justify an increase in pay. And the third point I want to make is this. Each of us is interdependent. As I pointed out earlier, other people pay our salaries, buy our homes, clothe, feed, and educate our children. Therefore, we depend on others for our very lives, just as they depend upon us. Now, if we expect others to give us excellent service and fine products for the money we spend, doesn't it make good sense that we should treat them the same way? Every hour spent at our work should be spent in the attempt to give the best of which we're capable. A baker's dozen for the money our company's customers spend for our products and services, and with which our salaries are paid. A person who tries to get the maximum return for the minimum of effort is only kidding himself. Sooner or later, the scales will balance. They must, for that's the law, whether we like it or not. This kind of individual actually shrinks as a person, as a human being, and he has no real place in a dynamic and swiftly changing world. And the fourth point is to try each day to find some way in which the work you're doing can be improved. Now, here again, you're guaranteeing an increase in your income in both categories. We all know that the cynics will laugh at this. I know them, you know them. But I don't know one who could be said to be doing well, do you? I know lots of men and women who are at the top of their fields who live their lives every day in the way I've suggested. Rather than go along with someone who's never proved in his own life that he knows what it's about, I'd prefer to believe the one who said, "As ye sow, so shall ye reap." I feel, as I'm sure you do, that he was more qualified to speak than the know-it-all who's behind in his installment payments. Anyway, it's worth a test. If you follow my suggestion for the next year, you'll be a different person, living a rich, rewarding, and meaningful life. 4 things, all of them simple. 1, remember that our rewards in life will be an exact proportion to our service. 2, by giving your work a larger percentage of your capabilities and talents, you must increase your income substantially. 3, since our lives depend on others, treat others in every facet of your life exactly as you want others to treat you. If you expect others to give you excellent products and services for the money you and your family spend, then you should make certain that your job is handled excellently, since it's the money of others which pays your salary. 4, try to find some way every day in which your work can be improved. And above all, know your boss. He's the customer. Treat him with the respect, care, and courtesy and humor he deserves. Remember that he pays all of your bills every month. He will buy everything you will ever own. He may be, of course, crude, coarse, ignorant, selfish, conniving, and a thoroughgoing savage. He often will be. And here it's more important that you treat him with all the care and attention you can muster. If you don't, and if you permit his attitude to affect yours, you're admitting that he's the stronger person. If you respond the same way he conducts himself, you're admitting you're no better than he is. But most people are nice people. They're people like you and me who want to be liked, who want to get along, and who want to be friends. They have problems and sorrows of their own, of which we're not aware. And they have bad days and disappointments. Make sure that the time they're with you is a high spot in their day, and they'll want to come back, not just because of your company, but because of you. If you do these things for a year, you'll be surprised and delighted, and you'll find that you wouldn't live any other way for the world. If you're already living this way, you know what I mean. Thank you.
This is Earl Nightingale. I'd like to tell you about the strangest secret in the world. Some years ago, Albert Schweitzer, the great doctor and Nobel Prize winner, was being interviewed in London, and a reporter asked him, "Doctor, what's wrong with men today?" The great doctor was silent for a moment, and then he said, "Men don't think. It's about this that I want to talk with you. We live today in a golden age. This is an era that man has looked forward to, dreamed of, and worked toward for thousands of years. But since it's here, we pretty well take it for granted. Ours is a land of abundant opportunity for everyone. But you know what happens? Let's take 100 men who all start even at the age of 25. If you asked any one of them if he wanted to be a success, he'd tell you that he did. And you'd notice that he was eager toward life. There was a certain sparkle to his eye, an erectness to his carriage, and life seemed like a pretty interesting adventure to him. But by the time these 100 men reach the age of 65, only 5 will have made the grade. Only 5 are successful.
When we say only 5% achieve success, we have to define success, and here's the definition. Success is the progressive realization of a worthy ideal. If a man is working toward a predetermined goal and knows where he's going, that man is a success. If he's not doing that, he's a failure. Success is the progressive realization of a worthy ideal. Rollo May, the distinguished psychiatrist, wrote a wonderful book called Man's Search for Himself. And in this book he says, the opposite of courage in our society is not cowardice, it's conformity. A survey was made one time that covered a lot of men, working men, and these men were asked, why do you work? Why do you get up in the morning? 19 out of 20 had no idea. They simply said, everyone goes to work in the morning, and that's the reason they do it, because everyone else is doing it. And there you have the trouble today. It's conformity. People acting like everyone else without knowing why, without knowing where they're going. Now, we learn to read by the time we're 7. We learn to make a living by the time we're 25. Usually, by that time, we're not only earning a living, we're supporting a family. And yet, by the time they're 65, the great majority hasn't learned how to become financially independent in the richest land that has ever been known. Why? They conform. They're acting like the wrong percentage group, the 95% who don't succeed. Why do these people conform? Well, let's get back to our definition of success. Who succeeds? The only man who succeeds is the man who is progressively realizing a worthy ideal. He's the man who says, I'm going to become this, and then begins to work toward that goal. He succeeds because he knows where he's going. Think of a ship leaving a harbor, and think of it with a complete voyage all mapped out and planned. The captain and crew know exactly where the ship is going and how long it will take. It has a definite goal, and it will reach that goal. Now let's take another ship, just like the first, only let's not put a crew on it, or a captain at the helm. Let's give it no aiming point, no goal, no destination. We just start the engines and let it go. I think you'll agree with me that if it gets out of the harbor at all, it will wind up on some deserted beach, a derelict. It can't go anyplace because it has no destination and no guidance. And it's the same with a human being. I'll tell you who the successful people are. A success is the school teacher who's teaching school because that's what he or she wanted to do. The success is the woman who's a wife and mother because she wanted to become a wife and mother and is doing a great job of it. The success is the man who runs the corner gas station because that's what he wants to do. The success is the successful salesman who wants to become a top-notch salesman and grow and build with his organization. A success is anyone who is doing deliberately a predetermined job because that's what he decided to do deliberately. But only 1 out of 20 does that. That's why today there really isn't any competition unless we make it for ourselves. Instead of competing, all we have to do is create. For 20 years, I looked for the key which would determine what would happen to a human being. Was there a key, I wanted to know, which would make the future a promise that we could foretell to a large extent? Was there a key that could guarantee a person's becoming successful if he only knew about it and knew how to use it? Well, there is such a key, and I've found it. Here's the key to success and the key to failure. We become what we think about. Now let me say that again. We become what we think about. Throughout all history, the great wise men and teachers, philosophers and prophets have disagreed with one another on many different things. It's only on this one point that they're in complete and unanimous agreement. Buddha said, all we are is what we've thought about. Marcus Aurelius said, a man's life is what his thoughts make of it. Disraeli said, everything comes if a man will only wait. I've brought myself by long meditation to the conviction that a human being with a settled purpose must accomplish it, and that nothing can resist a will that will stake even existence for its fulfillment. Ralph Waldo Emerson said this, a man is what he thinks about all day long. William James said, the greatest discovery of my generation is that human beings can alter their lives by altering their attitudes of mind. And George Bernard Shaw said, people are always blaming their circumstances for what they are. I don't believe in circumstances. The people who get on in this world are the people who get up and look for the circumstances they want, and if they can't find them, make them. Well, it's pretty apparent, isn't it? We become what we think about. It stands to reason that a person who's thinking about a definite and worthwhile goal is going to reach it, because that's what he's thinking about, and we become what we think about. Conversely, the man who has no goal, who doesn't know where he's going, and whose thoughts must therefore be thoughts of confusion and anxiety and fear and worry, becomes what he thinks about. His life becomes one of frustration, fear, anxiety, and worry. And if he thinks about nothing, he becomes nothing. You see, the human mind is the last great unexplored continent on Earth. It contains riches beyond our wildest dreams. It will return anything we plant in it. Now, you might say, but if that's true, why don't people use their minds more? Why don't they till their fertile mental soil? We have the answer to that, too. Our mind comes as standard equipment at birth. It's free, and things that are given to us for nothing, we place little value upon. Things that we pay money for, we value. The paradox is that exactly the reverse is true. Everything that's really worthwhile in life came to us free. Our minds, our souls, our bodies, our hopes, our dreams, our ambitions, our intelligence, our love of our families and children and friends. All these priceless possessions are free. But the things that cost us money are actually very cheap and can be replaced at any time. A good man can be completely wiped out and make another fortune. He can do that several times. Even if our homes burn down, we can rebuild them. But the things we got for nothing, the really valuable possessions, we can never replace. The human mind isn't used merely because we take it for granted. It can do any kind of a job we assign to it, but generally speaking, we use it for little jobs instead of big, important ones. Universities tell us that most of us are operating on about 10% of our abilities. Decide now. What is it you want? Plant your goal in your mind. Give yourself direction and a destination. It's the most important decision you'll ever make in your life. You see, the very law that gives us success is a two-edged sword. We must control our thinking. The same rule that can lead a man to a life of success, wealth, happiness, and all the things he's dreamed of for himself and his family, that very same law can lead him into the gutter. It's all in how he uses it, for good or bad. This is the strangest secret in the world. Remember these words from the Sermon on the Mount, and remember them well. Keep them constantly before you. Ask, and it shall be given you. Seek, and ye shall find. Knock, and it shall be opened unto you. For every one that asketh receiveth, and he that seeketh findeth, and to him that knocketh it shall be opened. It's as marvelous and as simple as that. In fact, it's so simple that in our seemingly complicated world, it's difficult for an adult to understand that all he needs is a purpose and faith. Above all, don't worry. Worry brings fear, and fear is crippling. The only thing that can cause you to worry is trying to do it all yourself. Know that all you have to do is hold your goal before you. Everything else will take care of itself. Remember also to keep calm and cheerful. Don't let petty things annoy you and get you off course. Prosperity is founded upon a law of mutual exchange. Any person who contributes to prosperity must prosper in turn himself. Sometimes the return will not come from those you serve, but it must come to you from someplace, for that's the law. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. There are no exceptions to a law. You can drive down any street in America, and from your car estimate the service that's being rendered by the people living on that street. Had you ever thought of this yardstick before? It's interesting. Once this law is fully understood, any thinking person can tell his own fortune. If he wants more, he must be of more service to those from whom he receives his return. If he wants less, he has only to reduce this service. This is the price you must pay for what you want. If you believe you can enrich yourself by deluding others, you can end only by deluding yourself. It may take some time, but just as surely as you breathe, you'll get back what you put out. The prisons, and we're going someplace, so we should make our time here an exciting adventure. The architect of the universe didn't build a stairway leading nowhere. And the greatest teacher of all, the carpenter from the plains of Galilee, gave us the secret time and time again. As ye believe, so shall it be done unto you.